Hello and welcome to the first in the series of our Excel seminars. My name is Owen Lynch and I'll be taking you through a lot of the really good features of, or one of the most used, or some of the most used features in Excel. Today's seminar we have called Excel Seminar 1. We have a line of these seminars, but today's one will be covering topics along the lines of pivot tables, lookups. These are kind of topics that people would use on a daily basis. Today we're going to be using Excel 2013, but as I say to most of my users out there, that it really doesn't make a huge difference between the likes of 2010 and 2013 when it comes to formulas and it comes to a lot of the features in our pivot tables. So let's get started. Let's take a look at the content that we're going to cover in the first of our seminars. First, I'd like to take a look at a few tips and tricks. Now, these are tips and tricks that I have built up over the last number of years, and these are the kind of tips and tricks that have got the most oohs and ahs whenever I show them in class or in a seminar. The next on the list then is we'll take a look at our pivot tables, our pivot charts, and one of the brilliant new features of 2010 and 2013, a slicer. Now, if you've not seen how the slicer works, this is a fantastic feature now in Excel 2010, and 2013. So we'll be talking about that in a bit more detail later on. From there, we're going to move on to a feature that was introduced originally in Excel 2007, our table feature. Again, very, very useful feature. Allows you to take your raw data, your lists, your ranges, your arrays, and turn them into a table, which basically means your data grows with the actual feature itself. From there, we're going to move on to VLOOKUPs. So VLOOKUPs, one of the most used formulas in Excel, are V and H lookups. Today, I'm going to show you how to make those lookups dynamic. That if I add new data to the source of my lookup, that it'll automatically grow with that. And again, that's where our table and our VLOOKUP go hand in hand. From there, we're going to look at one of the new formulas that was originally brought out in Excel 2007 called our if error. And the if error works extremely well with our V and H lookups. Anybody who's used them before knows that if we use a V and a H lookup, it normally comes back, if it doesn't find a result, coming back with the NA. So today, I'd like to show you how you can get rid of that NA using the if error. And from there then, last topic we're going to talk about then would be the new tab we've brought out in Excel called Tabby. But I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. So let's take a look at some of the tips that I hope to cover with you in the first of our seminars. The first one being navigating multiple worksheets. So if you've worked with Excel long enough, you know that, well, Excel can have multiple worksheets in it. So what I want to show you today is the best way to navigate those worksheets. Okay. From there, we're going to take a look at group selecting. So if I need to create a list or a table in one of my workbooks or in multiple worksheets of my workbook, what's the easiest and best way to do that, rather than trying to use copy and paste all the time? From there, we'll move on to duplicating worksheets. So if I've already created a worksheet and now I'm thinking I need another version of that or another copy of that, well, how do I duplicate that worksheet? And again, I'm going to show you how that one works in 2010 and 2013. The next we'll take a look at is the format painter. So 2010, 2013, actually all previous versions of Excel have a tool called the format painter. It allows you to take formatting from one area to the other. Only problem with the format painter is I find that most people are only really using the format painter to half of what it's capable of. From there, we'll move on to our AutoSum. AutoSum being one of the most widely used buttons in Excel, allowing you to use the sum function. I want to show you the shortcut key and what you can do with that shortcut key. And then the last of the tips then we'll take a look at is navigating and highlighting. So when you're working with lists of data, if you want to get down to the end of that list or you want to highlight that list, what's the best way to do that? I'll give you a few little tips on that too. So there's a couple of ideas of what we're going to be covering just with the tips and tricks side of things. So I suppose let's get started with it, and I'll start with the navigating multiple worksheets. So I'm just going to open up a workbook that I have here. Again, it's not a saved workbook, but really doesn't need to be for what we're about to do. The scenario I'm going to give you here is I'd like to create a table or a list that has all the formatting and all the formulas that I need in the first of my sheets. But obviously then I want the same table, the same list in multiple sheets after that. The problem that most people encounter is if you create a list or a table that has all the formatting and formulas you need, and then you try to copy and paste that into multiple worksheets, you find that you spend half your time tidying it up, or the formatting doesn't come over right, or your formulas don't come over right. So what's the best way to get around that? Well, it's called group selecting. So let me show you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create 4 worksheets. One I'm just going to call 2015. The next I'll call 2016, 2017, and the last of these sheets here I'm going to call 2018. 4 worksheets. Well, it really doesn't matter if you're going to use 4 worksheets or 44 worksheets. So I now want to create a table or a list in sheet 2015, but I want the exact same table and list in 2016, 17 and 18. So what's the best way to do that? Well, before I start to create the table, if I click on sheet 2015, I hold down my shift key and now select sheet 2018. What that essentially does is it temporarily highlights or groups 2015, 16 and 17 and 18 into a temporary group. How you can tell? Well, you can see my sheets here have got a whitish colour, and if you look up to the top here, you can see on the title bar it's telling me it's in group mode. Now I'm still in sheet 2015. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a very basic list here. So I'm just going to put my months across the top here, January through to December. I'll put a bit of formatting on those, bold, background colour yellow, font colour red. I'll even center the information. I might put a nice border around that table, okay, or that list. So again, I'm just going to go to my home tab here and use the all borders button. And one of the reasons why I tend to do that is quite often I find when I'm looking at spreadsheets, I'm nearly blinded with the colours that people use. So what I always say to people is you don't always have to use colours. A nice way of getting a kind of a list or a table to stand out is to use the simple borders button. And what I would do then is when I've applied my border, I would then go into my view tab, switch off the grid lines. So now when the user or users go into that worksheet or workbook, you can see their eye is drawn straight to the actual list or table. From there, I'll just add something, a small little formula. I'm just going to use sum here, for example. So I'm just going to ask it to sum up everything from A2 to A11. And I'll just copy that across using the autofill again. And I might as well put a little bit of currency on this. I'm going to use my euro option here with 2 decimal places. Okay, so there you can see I've got a bit of formatting, okay, basic formatting, and I've got a basic formula in there too, but it kind of gets the point across. Now, as you can see, I'm still in group mode. I'm still in sheet 2015. Now, what I want is that these 4 worksheets become individuals again, okay, because I obviously want to be able to enter the figures for 2015 in, 2016, 17, and so on and so forth. So if I now select the sheet that's not part of the group, what that does is it now deselects your 4 worksheets or your 44 worksheets. But if I go back into 2015 where you originally saw me creating the table, what I love about this tip is without one single copy and paste, there you have 2016, 17 and 18. Very, very useful for those of you out there that are going to be creating lists or tables, but you want that list or table appearing in multiple worksheets. So rather than trying to use the copy and paste, which you quite often find doesn't work, this way is a great way. It's called group selecting. Okay, now just going back to our presentation here, the next of our tips was duplicating that worksheet. So I'm just going to go back in here and going to go back into my presentation. And you can see the scenario then with this one is, well, I've already created the 4 tables or the 4 lists, 2015, 16, 17, 18, but now I realize, well, I need 2019. So when I ask most people, what do you do here? Well, then I get the few that say copy and paste, but I get others that say, well, I come down to the worksheet tab, I right click and I use the move or copy. Now the move or copy is great, but I really only use that if I'm moving or copying it to another location. So based on the way I'm talking, you can tell there's going to be an easier way to do this, and there is. If I come down to, for example, 2018 here, and what I'd like to do is duplicate this worksheet. So the easiest way to do this is come down to the worksheet tab, left click on it, Keep your finger on that left mouse button, but hold down the control key at the same time. Now, if I drag that across as if I'm about to move it, okay, keep my finger on the left mouse, keep my finger on the control key, but let go of the left mouse button. You can see it automatically duplicates the worksheet. So now all I have to do is call that 2019. Absolutely brilliant that if you've already spent the time designing a list or a table and you want to duplicate it again, control and drag. It's also very useful, and here's a little scenario for you. It's also very useful that if you've already created something in a previous workbook and now you're thinking, well, I actually need it in this one. So again, I want to take that sheet across into my current workbook because I've already spent the time designing it and using my formulas, that kind of thing. So, as most of you will say, you would use the move or copy here. But we can also use the tip that I've just given you. Let me give you an example. So I have book 1 open. I'm just going to open up a brand new workbook. So I've just got book 1 and book 2 open. Now if I go back to book 1 here, I'm going to use my view tab here and I'm going to use the arrange all option. So what this allows me to do is sit the 2 current workbooks that I have open side by side. So I'm just going to choose tiled here and click OK. And you can see it just sits the 2 workbooks side by side. But it's now I want to take across this 2019 worksheet over to this current workbook here. Again, it's done the same way using the exact same tip. Left click on the worksheet tab, hold down your control key and drag across. Let go of the left mouse button but keeping your finger on the control key and you can see it duplicates it, brings it across into your current workbook. Okay, so again, you're not wasting time building the same tables over and over again. If you've already done it, well, it's a nice way of bringing worksheets over to current workbooks that you're working with. So I'll just close out of this one here. So there you have it. There is the tip for duplicating your worksheet. So go back to the presentation again. I want to now look at the Format Painter option. So I'm going to go back into my current workbook and you can see here, I'll just open up one of my worksheets here. I'm just going to put a couple of headings in the current worksheet here. I'm just going to use my January through to December using the autofill. I'll copy those. Let's paste another set of headings here and another set of headings down here. I'll even go into a different sheet and do the same thing. Now, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to apply a bit of formatting to cell A1 here. So I'm going to say all my headings should be bold, using a background color yellow, font color of red. They should be centered and using a font size of 12. Now, obviously, when I was applying that formatting, I've forgotten to highlight the rest of my headings, so February through to December. So how can I take the formatting from this cell and bring it across the board? It's done using the Format Painter. Now, if you've used the Format Painter before, you'll know this next tip. So let me just show you how it works for those that haven't used it before. If I click in the cell that has the formula that I want, click once on my Format Painter. If you look at my cursor, you can see it's now got the Format Painter beside it. I then highlight my new cells, so everything from B1 across to L1, and you can see it copies the formatting across. Now, if you've used the Format Painter before, you probably knew that. But the bit that most people fall down when it comes to this tool is, what if I need to apply that to multiple areas? So what you get a lot of people doing is clicking the format, clicking the cell that has the formatting, clicking on the Format Painter, highlighting, and they're back and forth to the Format Painter every single time. So here's what we need to do. Select the cell that has the formatting, but this time double click. Single click, use the Format Painter once, double click, use it multiple times. So if I highlight, and I can keep highlighting, and the great thing about this is I can even go into different worksheets and keep applying that formatting. If I have multiple workbooks open, I can go into those too and keep applying that formatting. As soon as I'm done, I either click back on the Format Painter or I can hit my escape key to switch it off. Okay. There's your Format Painter. So you can see next on the list then we're going to look at the shortcut key for the auto sum. So I'm just going to go back into the file that I have open here. Actually, I have a previous file, so I'm just going to go into one I've already created called the auto sum here. So if you've worked with formulas in any way, shape or form when it comes to Excel, you've definitely come across the sum function before. The sum function is a really, really widely used formula, a really popular formula in Excel. So much so that Microsoft have come up with a button for it, the auto sum button. It's actually found, because it's so widely used, it's actually found in 2 locations. It's found under Home, here it is here, the auto sum. You'll also find it under Formulas, here it is here, the auto sum. But in actual fact, when I'm using the auto sum, I use neither button. because the great thing about the auto sum button is it has its own shortcut key too. So if I want to sum up a group of cells, I can click on the cell and hit Alt and equals. Alt and equals is your shortcut key for the auto sum button. So you can see it's now saying equals sum B2 to B5. In this scenario, I hit my enter key, automatic calculation to ask it to calculate that, and then I want to copy that formula across for the next 11 months. So this is where I use my autofill to copy it across. Do the same thing for my first product here, Alt equals. Again, it's just giving me the formula to see if it's correct, B2 to M2. Yes, it is. Hit my enter key, and then click back in the cell and use my autofill to copy it down. Okay, so if you're using the sum function on a regular basis, it's good to know that it does have its own shortcut key. But here's something you may not know, and this is one of the little tips that I love about the auto sum. So you can see I'm clearing all my totals, but in actual fact, you can actually get the auto sum button to fill all those totals in one click. Now, in an ideal world, all our tables are nice, neat, small tables like they are here, okay? But we know in reality they quite often aren't. But in this scenario, what I want to be able to do is take all these individual values and where I want the totals to appear. And then if I hit the auto sum button, you can see it fills the totals all in one go. Okay, so there's the auto sum button. Nice to know it does have its own shortcut key. And just a little tip for you as well. If you ever forget the auto sum, the shortcut key for the auto sum, what I really like about 2010 and 2013 is they have these detailed screen tips on the actual commands themselves. So if I come over to the auto sum button, you can see it's now telling me sum, alt and equals, the shortcut key. So if you ever forget it, or if you're ever wondering does a command button have its own shortcut key, the best way to find out is to hover over the button and it'll tell you if it does. So going back again then to our tips, the next on the list then is navigating and highlighting. So if you're working with large lists of data, or lists in general, what's the easiest way to navigate those lists? So let's take a look. So I'm just going to open up one of the files that I have here. So I'll just open up pivot table example 1 here. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is not a particularly large file, but you'll get the general gist of how it works. So I want to be able to, for example, jump around that data. I want to be able to move around that data fairly quickly. What's the best way to do something like that? Now, there are multiple ways you can do this. I find the easiest way is to use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So for example here, I'm currently in cell A2. I may want to move down to the very last cell on that list. So if I hold down my control key, I hit arrow right once, it brings you to the last column. Control down arrow brings me to the last cell. So you can see I've got 111 records in there, but it doesn't really make a difference if I've 111 or 111,000. And the thing is, if I hit the control down arrow again, because there's no more data below that, it brings you right down to the end of your workbook, which in 2010 and 13 has 1,048,576 rows in it. So if I go back up again, you can see it becomes a lot quicker and a lot easier when you're using your control and your arrow keys. Now what about highlighting? So if I want to highlight that particular set of data, I'm going to take the tip that I've just used, the control and the arrow keys, but I'm going to add this shift key to that. So if I hold down control shift, arrow right and arrow down, you can see in 2 clicks, it's highlighted all 111 rows and all 8 different columns. Now again, it doesn't matter really how big or how small that data is. The control and the arrow keys for navigating, control shift and the arrow keys, very, very useful. And you can see I can also use it for scenarios where maybe I just want to highlight the sales column. So I can highlight the sales column, click on the very start and control shift arrow. That particular tip I like to show people also works very, very well if you're putting large ranges into formulas too. Let me give you a scenario. If I come over here and I'm looking to put a total in here. For example, I want a total of the sales column. Now, the problem here is I can't really use the auto sum button because, well, it's not near the data itself. So what I want to do here is I want to sum up all of the sales column. Now what you find most people would do at this point is they click in the very first cell and start clicking and dragging. Now with 111 rows, that's not too bad. But if you've got 111,000 rows, it's going to make a bit of a difference. So here's where you can use the tip I've just given you. Click on the very first cell of that range and then just simply do control shift down arrow. And you can see it puts the large range in, close off your bracket and hit enter. And there we have our nice total. So if you're working with large ranges within formulas, that tip is very, very useful too. Okay. Now, going back to the tips here, there was one I did leave out, the navigating multiple worksheets. So it's just something I wanted to kind of show you here. I haven't forgotten about it, so I'm just going to go back to my previous workbook here. Because here's the thing, when it comes to Excel 2007, 10 or 13, Microsoft Excel allows you to have up to 255 worksheets in a single workbook. So what I'd like to show you here, first of all, is how to change that default. And it's very, very easy to do in Excel. All I need to do is go to my File tab. This brings you into what they call the Backstage view. And I'm going to go down to my Options. This will then bring up the Excel options. This is basically your settings for Excel. And you can see here, under General, on the right-hand side, it says include this many sheets. So you can see how I've changed my setting here because the default for 2013 number of worksheets to open up with a workbook is 1. For 2007 and 2010, it's 3. And you can see, if I hover over this, it should tell me I can enter any whole number between 1 and 255. So for example here, I might just change this for argument's sake to 15. And if I click OK, what you'll notice straight away is nothing has changed. But it's the next time you go into Excel that that setting will take place. So if I close out of this file, I don't really need to save anything, so I won't save it, and I open up a brand new one, you can see it's from now on that this setting will kick in. Okay, so there you have it. You can change the number of worksheets, which is always good because rather than having to insert worksheets every single time, that's a nice change you can make that allows you to have anywhere between 1 and 255 worksheets in a single workbook. So let's think about that. Potentially you could have a workbook that has 255 worksheets in it. So one thing you're going to need to be able to do then is you're going to be able to navigate those worksheets. So what's the best way to navigate? Well, if we look at it here, there's a slight difference here between 2010 and 2013. 2010, when you look down to the left of your sheet 1, you'll see these 4 navigation keys. 2013 just has 2. But the navigating side of things is done the same way. Here's the first tip I'd like to give you then with the navigating side of things. The next time you want to jump to a particular sheet, so imagine you have 255 worksheets and you want to get to sheet 150, for example. You could be there all day using the next button. So the next time you're navigating your worksheets, all I would simply say to you is come down to one of your navigation keys, doesn't matter which one, and right click on it. And you can see as soon as you right click then, it brings you up a list of all the worksheets in that workbook. Select the one that you want, click OK, and you can see it jumps directly to it. So if I want to go back again, nice and easy, right click, sheet 1, and away I go. So it just makes the whole kind of navigating through multiple worksheets that bit easier. Now quite often when I go through these navigating sheets, I'm always asked, well, is there a shortcut way of doing something like that, similar to that? Well, there is. The next time you want to move through your worksheets, now I can't get you to jump to particular worksheets, but I can get you to move through each one individually. The shortcut for that is to hold down your control key and use page down to bring you down through your worksheets, control page up to bring you back up through them. Okay, so there you go. A couple of nice little tips when it comes to navigating your multiple worksheets in a workbook. But there we have the 6 top tips that I've come across when working with Excel.